The Steam Summer Sale 2026 has officially begun, which means millions of PC players are currently performing the same annual ritual, opening Steam, looking at their enormous backlog, promising themselves they won't buy anything, and then somehow spending £40 on 12 games they probably won't install until 2029. It's one of the most reliable traditions in gaming. The sun comes out, everyone complains that it's too hot, and Valve begins selling critically acclaimed video games for approximately the price of a meal deal. But the 2026 Steam Summer Sale is particularly interesting because it arrives at a time when gaming is becoming increasingly expensive. New games are pushing towards £70 or even £80. Hardware prices are unpredictable. Subscription services keep creeping upwards. Publishers are experimenting with premium editions, early access upgrades, and increasingly aggressive monetization. And then Steam comes along and offers Dead Space for less than a fiver. That contrast is exactly why these sales still matter. This isn't just an excuse to fill your library with another 50 games. It's a reminder that despite everything happening across the industry, PC gaming can still offer some genuinely absurd value. Let's begin with one of the most ridiculous offers in the entire sale. The Dead Space remake is 90% off, bringing it down from $49.99 to just $4.99 in the UK. The deluxe edition is only $5.99 as well. This is also being listed as a new historical low for the game. This is an outrageous amount of game for £5. This isn't some broken PC port from 15 years ago that EA has discovered in the back of a cupboard. This is the excellent 2023 remake. Modern visuals, fantastic sound design, expanded exploration, and one of the best survival horror settings ever created. Dead Space is the kind of game that benefits massively from being played on PC as well. Turn the lights off, put some decent headphones on, and immediately regret every decision that led you to entering the USG Ishimura. For less than the price of a takeaway, it's almost impossible to argue against it. Then we have Cyberpunk 2077, which has received its largest Steam discount so far. It's currently 70% off, taking the UK price from $49.99 down to $14.99. Cyberpunk is fascinating because it has effectively experienced two completely different lives. There was the disastrous launch version, broken, unfinished, and surrounded by controversy. Then there's the game it officially became after years of patches, overhauls, and additional content. It still isn't perfect, but the current version of Cyberpunk is a genuinely impressive open-world RPG with excellent characters, memorable quests, and one of the most visually distinctive cities in gaming. At £15, it's much easier to recommend than it ever was at launch. The Phantom Liberty expansion is also discounted by 40%, so anyone who already owns the base game can finally experience what is arguably the strongest content CDPR created for it. The Steam sale truly becomes dangerous when games fall below £5, because that's when your brain stops treating them as purchases. You don't think, should I buy this? You think it would practically be irresponsible not to. The standard version of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is 90% off, bringing it down to £2.49. The complete edition containing both major expansions is also heavily reduced. At this point, The Witcher 3 has been discounted so many times that almost everyone on Earth probably owns it. There are probably uncontacted tribes in the Amazon with 6 copies in their Steam libraries as well, but if you somehow haven't played it, this is still one of the safest recommendations in the sale. The base game alone can easily consume more than 100 hours, and the expansions aren't throwaway DLC. Blood and Wine is practically another RPG attached to the end of the original game. You are getting an enormous, beautifully written fantasy adventure for less than the cost of a coffee. Another almost comical bargain is Mass Effect Legendary Edition, which is currently 92% off. That puts the entire remastered Commander Shepard trilogy, including more than 40 pieces of downloadable content, at a roughly £4. 3 enormous RPGs, 1 continuous story, dozens of companions, hundreds of choices, and enough questionable romantic decisions to permanently damage intergalactic diplomacy. Mass Effect Legendary Edition might offer the best pure value in the entire sale. Even if the first game shows its age in places, the complete trilogy remains one of gaming's most ambitious narrative achievements. And then there's Titanfall 2 Ultimate Edition, sitting at 85% off for £3.74. Titanfall 2 has become one of those games people constantly describe as underrated, even though everybody now seems to agree it's amazing. Its campaign isn't especially long, but almost every level introduces a new idea. It has incredible movement, fantastic weapons, and one of the best relationships between a player character and a giant robot in gaming. For less than £4, you could buy Titanfall 2, finish it over a weekend, and still feel like you received better value than many modern 60-hour games. For anyone looking for something to play with friends, Deep Rock Galactic is 70% off, reducing it from £24.99 to £7.49. Deep Rock is one of the easiest co-op games to recommend because it understands something that many live service games have forgotten. Playing should be enjoyable without constantly feeling like you are being manipulated. You choose a class, travel into a procedurally generated cave, mine resources, fight alien creatures, and attempt to escape without abandoning whichever member of your group has inevitably fallen down a massive hole. It has years of free seasonal content, a fantastic community, and very little of the artificial fear of missing out nonsense that has infected so many multiplayer games. Overcooked 2 is also 75% off, while It Takes Two is discounted by 70% off. Although describing Overcooked as a cooperative experience is slightly misleading, technically you are working together. Emotionally, you are discovering which of your closest friends becomes completely useless when asked to chop an onion under pressure. If your friendship survives Overcooked, it can survive anything. Not every good deal needs to bring a game below £5. Red Dead Redemption 2 is currently 75% off, bringing one of Rockstar's largest and most detailed games down to $14.99. This is obviously a slower game than something like Titanfall 2. Arthur Morgan doesn't sprint through a corridor or run around a corner and call in a giant mechanical companion. Sometimes Arthur spends several seconds carefully opening a drawer, but that deliberate pace is part of the appeal. Red Dead Redemption 2 wants you to inhabit its world rather than simply sprint between objective markers. At £15, it's an excellent opportunity for anyone who avoided it because they weren't sure whether that slower style would work for them. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is another substantial single-player game, now discounted by 80%. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has also received a 60% reduction, while Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is 65% off. These are exactly the kind of discounts I find more interesting than a random 90% reduction on something nobody was planning to buy. Rebirth is still a relatively recent PC release. Jedi Survivor launched at full AAA price. Seeing major cinematic games drop this heavily shows how quickly waiting can pay off. And that is perhaps the most important lesson of the Steam Summer Sale. You don't need to buy every game at launch, unless you are desperate to be part of the immediate conversation. Waiting 6 months or a year can give you a more polished game, complete with updates at a fraction of the original price. The indie section is where Steam sales become overwhelming because there are thousands of brilliant games competing for attention. Dave the Diver is 50% off, reaching a new historical low according to SteamDB. Dave the Diver is one of those games that sounds completely unfocused when you explain it. You dive for fish during the day, run a sushi restaurant at night, complete quests, upgrade equipment, manage staff, investigate mysterious underwater civilizations, and somehow all of it fits together. It's charming, constantly introduces new mechanics, and understands exactly how to reward the player without turning the experience into exhausting busywork. Dredge is 60% off, combining fishing with exploration and creepy Lovecraftian horror. Cult of the Lamb is half price, and both Blasphemous games have received major reductions, with the original sitting at 90% off and the sequel at 75% off. These are perfect Steam Deck games as well. That handheld compatibility has quietly made the summer sale even more dangerous because buying a smaller indie game now feels like purchasing something for two different platforms. You can play it at your desk, continue it on the sofa, and then ignore the outside world for the rest of the summer. There's also one deal that requires no complicated financial analysis whatsoever. Tell Me Why is currently free to keep, with the offer running until the 1st of July. This is the complete narrative adventure from Don't Nod, the studio associated with Life is Strange. Even if you don't plan to play it immediately, add it to your account. It costs nothing, and once claimed, it remains in your library. That's the one part of this video where I'm actively encouraging you to increase your backlog. It's free, we'll allow it. But this is where we need to discuss the dark side of the Steam Summer Sale, because the game is not automatically a bargain simply because the discount is large. If you spend £30 on 8 games and never play any of them, you haven't saved money. You've simply purchased 8 colourful rectangles for your digital shelf. Steam has perfected the psychology of making games feel temporarily irresistible. The crossed out price, the massive green percentage, and the countdown. The recommendation algorithm is showing you something suspiciously similar to the game you bought 5 minutes ago. It creates the feeling that you must act now. But there are no daily flash deals here. The discount remains active until the 9th of July. You have time. Look at your wishlist, check the historical price. Ask yourself whether you are realistically going to install the game during the next few weeks. And most importantly, don't buy a game simply because someone on YouTube said it was cheap, including me. A focused purchase of 1 or 2 games you genuinely want is much better than buying 15 games because the combined discount supposedly saved you £300. You can't save £300 on things you were never going to purchase. That's not saving, that is Steam-powered mathematics. Overall though, the 2026 Steam Summer Sale has some fantastic deals. Dead Space for $4.99 is ridiculous. Cyberpunk 2077 for $14.99 is incredibly tempting. Mass Effect Legendary Edition for roughly £4 might be the best value proposition in the sale. Titanfall 2 remains essential. Deep Rock Galactic is perfect for co-op players, and Tell Me Why is literally free. The wider game industry may be pushing towards more expensive releases, premium editions, and increasingly complicated monetization, but sales like this demonstrate the advantage of having an enormous back catalogue. You don't need to spend £70 to find something worth playing. Sometimes the most memorable game you play all year is an older title you bought for £4 because you finally decided to give it a chance. Just remember to exercise some self-control. Buy the games you actually intend to play, ignore the enormous number beside the shopping basket, and do not allow Gabe Newell to convince you that owning 23 unfinished RPGs is a financially responsible investment. Because the Steam Summer Sale not only takes your money, but it slowly transforms it into a backlog as well.